Well, here we are, 1 week before the elections. This is Sunday the 15th of March. Now, if you've looked in the newspapers over this weekend, there's one thing very blatantly clear. Page after page after page, there's even full-page pictures of Premier Bligh. There's full-page pictures of Springbok. But let me ask you something. Where is there any coverage of independence? Now, if we're living in a democratic country, how in the hell can the people, ordinary people, mums and dads, know that there is independent people quite capable of being elected into government to look after their affairs, but the public don't even know about them? As you know, in this particular report, previously, I did a 4-minute clip with Channel 9 and Gold Coast News. And how much went to air that night? You saw it, 10 seconds. And how much went to air for the big ones? A total of 3.5 minutes. Now, is that fair? I don't think it's fair. Do you think it's fair? Do you want to know whether there are independents and what these independents are entering Parliament for? How can you know if you don't go to the newspapers? How can you know? Ask the newspapers, write to the newspapers, tell the newspapers, and tell the media, tell the electronic media. They're not getting a fair go of what's going on in our state of Queensland, let alone Australia. And if we don't do something about the way the media are conducting their professionalism, all I can say is we'll never get out of the problems that we've got right now. You see, if you want to look at what's going on, independent people that are running for Parliament, they know what you need. They know what the people need. When you've got the big parties which have sold us away to the Agenda 21, to the New World Order, they're doing what they're told to do, but not by you. They're doing what they're told to do by New York air-conditioned offices. They're doing what they're told to do from, shall we say, Canberra. And worse than that, just for example, one example, fluoride was put into the water of Queensland after, as you know, a couple of years back, the people said no to fluoride. Now, fluoride was pushed in by Premier Bligh, but guess what we found out? And you can do your own checking on this. The suppliers, the wholesale suppliers of fluoride, what did they do? They gave a whopping big donation to the Labor Party. No wonder the Labor Party wants to put fluoride poison into your drinking water and then deny that it has any side effects for your thyroid or your pineal gland, or lowering the quality of life for your children and making people sick. They don't want to know about that, and they are ignoring 3,000 scientific reports that prove that fluoride is a poison. That's just one example. You're going to find out that it is only the independent people that are going to be truthful to you. The Labor and the Liberal, have you heard them talk about putting recycled sewage back on the table? I bet you haven't. Have you seen anything about it in the media? No, you haven't. Have you heard about Labor and Liberal talking about the fluoride issue? No, you haven't. But how many independents have you listened to? Well, all of those independents you've got between here and Cairns, they're going to tell you the truth about fluoride, the truth about recycled sewage, the truth about amalgamation of the councils. They're all hearing from the people that the people are sick and tired of having things pushed down their throat that they didn't ask for. I'll tell you an example. I was talking to a lady today in the Burleigh district on the Gold Coast, and she said, thank God, she said, I didn't know that we had an independent that we could vote for. I said, well, I'm here and I'm an independent. She said, but we don't know about it. We look in the newspapers and all we know about is Liberal or Labor. No wonder. Thank you, she said. I'm going to vote for you and all my family's going to vote for you. Let me tell you what's going to happen. If the people of Queensland do not elect some independents to take the balance of power away from the big boys, you're going to have the same problems that you've had for the last 20 years. It is the independents that will make the difference. But you know what we saw in the newspapers the other day? Here we're talking about, or they're talking about, a hung parliament. There's no such a thing as a hung parliament. Just because the independents are going to upset the Labor and the Liberal Party the independents are going to upset them by taking a little bit of power away from them. They don't like that. But the worst thing here is that the newspapers and the television are not giving you any coverage of what the independents can do for you. And I hope, and I would hope, that this election, you, the people, will recognise the value of voting for an independent candidate. Now, you've heard in this election that they're all promising to spend money. Well, how can you spend money that you don't have? I know, if you spend a lot of money that you don't have and you've had to borrow it, and you've found out now that the Labor government has borrowed $74 billion, and they've borrowed it from the Federal Reserve and the corporations overseas. But what have they given as collateral? Nobody borrows money without giving collateral. You ask your Member of Parliament, what did you give for collateral? And if they want to be truthful, they'll tell you that they've given your land as bonds. And when we can't pay $74 billion back, what happens to our land? What happens? The lender takes over. By default, they take over the property that you have. Now, already, there's billions and billions of dollars of property being taken over in America by China. Do we want that to happen here? Because that will happen here. Already you've got the Labor government promising you thousands of jobs, and then the Liberal Party promising you thousands of jobs. Well, how are they going to promise you thousands of jobs on money they don't own? How are they going to promise you thousands of jobs spending money that they can't repay? Well, if they want to repay the loans that they're borrowing to make up these promises, then they'll have to lift up your taxes. There's no other way. So they'll have to lift up the taxes, which is taking the money off you and giving it back to you in some kind of a fake promise. And that's what they're doing. And the media is polarising this. And you've got the one, two, the Liberal, the Labor. The media are not doing the right thing in their professionalism. Is there a reason here for us to go to the government powers that give the licence to the media and make a complaint? I think there is. And I would ask you, make a complaint to those authorities in government that give the licence to the media to broadcast and and for the press. Now, talking about borrowing money and talking about countries going broke, governments going into liquidation, do a Google search. Go in, ask the question, how many countries now are going into liquidation? And who sends them into liquidation? The fellows that print the money. That's the Federal Reserve. You think they're government? No, they're not. They are private corporation, private people. And they have sent broke, I think at the last count, 17 countries have gone broke. And you can get all these details on the internet now. And America is on the way down to go broke, and there will be a total meltdown. And the way they do that is to force or stimulate the governments to spend more money, to chase the debts. Well, when has anybody chased the debts to get out of debt by spending more money? Particularly when you haven't got it and you've got to borrow it. Now here in Australia, again, the federal government and the Labor governments are spending money like confetti. They're throwing it around like confetti. And somewhere down the line, it's going to bounce back on us. And they're making a promise to you to give you something which is inadvertently coming from you. Now, one of the laughable things that's happening in this election, we have Premier Bligh telling you that she wants you to join her green machine. You know something? The EPA, the green machine, the people that are looking after this habitat out here, the marine habitat out here where I'm pointing, if you look closely you might see a little bit of seagrass there just on the top of the water. That seagrass is all that's left. There's nothing out there to feed our marine life, our habitat, for the spawning habitat of our fish. All the dugong are gone. And you know why? Because this so-called green machine of the Labor Party have allowed this destruction to happen all the way from Tweed border all the way through to Cooktown. They have allowed, the EPA have allowed and permitted wanton destruction by glyphosate, Roundup, that when they're sprayed in all of the gutters and all of the catchment area, then the rains come and wash it all out here into the Broadwater, into the ocean, and that's where it kills the habitat for our native fish. But the stupid part about this, between here and Moreton Bay, now they want to put a limit on how many fish you catch, because they're blaming you for fishing it out. That's a joke. Mankind hasn't fished this out. It's been killed out by the government, by the EPA, and by the so-called green machine that Premier Bligh wants you to join.